Thanks for listening to the GOSH podcast, the Gynecologic Oncology Sharing Hub. We share real, evidence-based discussions on gynecologic cancers featuring stories from patients, survivors, researchers, and clinicians. Our podcast is produced and recorded on traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It is produced by the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative, a BC-wide effort to advance research and care for gynecologic cancers.
Hello and welcome back to another GOSH podcast episode. Today, we are pleased to introduce an exciting new program of research recently awarded funding through the CIHR's Team Grants, bringing biology to cancer prevention competition. BEACON, which is short for Biological Basis of Contraceptive Choice Associated Ovarian Cancer Risk, from Populations Through Cells to Action, a 5-year research program examining how contraceptive choice influences ovarian cancer risk. Today, I am joined by the co-applicants, Dr. David Huntsman and Dr. Gillian Hanley, and by Dr. Laura Schummers, who is stepping in for AIM3 lead Dr. Wendy Norman. Dr. David Huntsman is a professor in the departments of pathology and laboratory medicine and obstetrics and gynecology at the University of British Columbia, the Dr. Choi Wei Memorial Professor of Gynecologic Oncology, a pathologist, and a Canadian Research Chair in Molecular and Genomic Pathology. He is a world expert in ovarian cancer genomics and molecular pathology, having led seminal discoveries of key mutations in several ovarian cancer histotypes and their precursors. Dr. Gillian Hanley is an associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at UBC and is a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Population-Based Gynecologic and Perinatal Outcomes. With training in epidemiology, health services research, and health economics, she's an expert in complex population-based and biospecimen clinical linkages. Dr. Laura Schummers is an assistant professor of health outcomes in the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences at UBC. She's a reproductive epidemiologist and health policy researcher and completed her postdoctoral fellowships with the Contraception and Abortion Research Team founded by Dr. Wendy Norman. All right, so welcome to the GOSH podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I was thinking we could start our discussion talking about, we're obviously here today to talk about two different, very distinct things, but they are linked. So what can you tell us about how contraceptive choice is related to ovarian cancer risk?
Okay, so we've known for a long time that reproductive factors are important risk and protective factors for ovarian cancer risk. So we've known that the use of combined oral contraceptive pills, so those are birth control pills that include both estrogen and progestin, use of combined oral contraceptive pills for 5 or more years halves your risk for ovarian cancer, and in particular, high-grade serous ovarian cancer, which is the most common and the most lethal form of ovarian cancer. We also know other reproductive factors are important as well. So the number of children that someone has had, with an increased number of children resulting in a lower risk for high-grade serous ovarian cancer, as well as some of the other histotypes of ovarian cancer, and even incomplete pregnancies. So pregnancies that don't ultimately end up in a live birth are protective against ovarian cancer.
Okay, so that's a pretty large reduction, 50%. Do we know how combined oral contraceptive pills are protective against ovarian cancer?
So if you look in textbooks, they will talk about how oral contraceptive pills prevent ovulation and wounding of the ovarian surface epithelium. And wounded tissue sometimes acquires mutations, and the thought was that's why cancers occur. But since then, we've discovered that most ovarian cancers, they actually come from the fallopian tube and not from the ovarian surface epithelium. So that hypothesis makes no sense. And so in reality, we don't know how this massive population-wide protective effect occurred. We don't know whether, to what degree IUDs will have similar effect. We don't believe they will. Or, very importantly, whether the new progestin-only options, such as drospirenone, will have a similar effect. And since it would take 20 to 30 years to get epidemiologic data, and we can't wait for that with such a massive impact, it would lead to an epidemic of ovarian cancers. We're looking at it by using some new technologies, which are collectively called spatial biology, where we can actually look at a large number of fallopian tubes from women with different or contraceptive exposures or controls who had none, looking at premenopausal and postmenopausal individuals, and look at what's going on in their fallopian tubes, and in particular, looking at the expression of all the genes in different cell types, looking for DNA damage, looking for proliferation of different cell types, and getting a very detailed sort of cellular view of what's happening. And we hope we'll be able to find out exactly, why these birth control pills prevented the ovarian cancers, and maybe find a way forward where we can capture that protective effect in some other way.
Very interesting. And why is it so timely to be sort of asking these questions?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of pretty substantial shift in terms of the method mix of contraception that people are using across the population in Canada, where for a long time, combined oral contraceptive pills were by far the majority in terms of contraceptive method of choice. And that's really been shifting. We're now in British Columbia, we actually just have new data as of 2025 that about 50% of people using contraception are using a long-acting reversible contraceptive device like an IUD or contraceptive implant. At the same time, we're also seeing temporal trends across Canada as well as internationally with really reduced use of combined oral contraceptive pills broadly, including through an increase in what we're coining hormone hesitancy, where an increasing number, especially of the people in their younger reproductive years, are shying away now from that method of contraception. And so really making sure that people are equipped to have the complete set of information that could inform their contraception decision-making in terms of their long-term health it's really timely to figure that out now.
Very interesting. And so this is a big research program. What is Beacon aiming to investigate?
So we have three aims, which are very complementary and connect to the unique opportunity we have working in BC on this problem and the strengths of the team. So in the first one, we're looking at the biology of how different contraceptive exposures impact the tissue which the cancers come from, namely fallopian tube. And I lead that aim, and Dr. Hanley leads the second aim, if you'd like to describe it.
Yeah, the second aim is really to work with the rich administrative population-based data that we have here in British Columbia to model what we think the impact of these shifts in contraceptive choice could be on the incidence of high-grade serous ovarian cancer in the future. So with that model, we can imagine that nothing were to change and we were to continue exactly along the path that we're on right now. But we can also envision different scenarios where the work that we're doing in Beacon, and Laura will tell you more about AIM 3 and how we may be able to change some of the contraceptive choices that people are making through this work. We can examine how some of those shifts could also be incorporated to minimize any kind of negative impact on the incidence of high-grade serous cancer in the future. So for example, we're not going to convince people to use combined oral contraceptive pills if that's something that they really don't want to do, but we have other tools at our disposal as well. So we know that salpingectomy, which is removal of both fallopian tubes, dramatically reduces risk for high-grade serous cancer. So what it may look like is that people make their contraceptive choices in their early years based on their preferences and what is going to be most effective contraception for them. And then in their later years, when they're, finished with fertility, they could possibly consider salpingectomy as a way to dramatically reduce their risk at that time.
And then in the third aim, we really bring this together and expand beyond the confines of our research team to partner with leaders in clinical guideline development, in decision tool development to sort of give both patients and clinicians the tools they need to make informed choices that bring together evidence from each of these aims, as well as the previous existing knowledge in this area. And we will partner with health system leaders and policymakers so that together we have really a cohesive strategy going forward that supports people to make the best choice, both to prevent pregnancy and then to manage their risk of ovarian cancer over their life course based on their own specific risk of this really serious cancer.
To me, what makes the team really and the approach really different and exciting is that when we write cancer grants, often we work with patient partners, and we really value their lived-in experience, what they bring to all discussions. But here, that is not our target group. This is the target group are young women who are considering contraceptive options, perhaps in their teens or early 20s, for whom being 60, let alone being 60 with ovarian cancer, would be a very abstract concept. And so we're very grateful that we get to work with Action Canada, which was called Planned Parenthood, and their youth council in particular on the third aim, because for us to make a difference, that is the population whom we need to communicate with.
Fantastic. Well, that was a great summary of all of the important work being done in this program. So just to reiterate, why do you think people should be interested in the findings of your study?
I think that many people in the general public actually aren't aware of the fact that their contraceptive choices have such an important impact on their ovarian cancer risk. And this is true beyond just ovarian cancer. There are other cancers that are impacted by your contraceptive choices as well, including endometrial cancer, breast cancer, even colorectal cancer. There's some evidence to suggest that your contraceptive choices can impact your risk. And this is something that I don't think is particularly well understood. I think people have sort of gotten this message that using hormones may increase your risk for breast cancer, but the reduced risks for ovarian and endometrial cancer, that message really hasn't gotten through the same way. And the increased risk for breast cancer is very, very, very small, whereas the protective effect for these other gynecologic cancers is very large, as we've already discussed. And, as we mentioned, it's not that we're aiming to change everybody's contraceptive choices. We want people to use the contraception that works for them. But we have usually a 25 to 30-year window that people are trying not to get pregnant. And so there's a long time there where we can, change or manipulate one choice in a way that makes sense for that person at that time and really dramatically reduce their risk for some of these other cancers. And so that's something that this grant is seeking to work on.
I just want to add that one of the really exciting things about this project is that we're all coming from these different fields where oftentimes we might have this cancer research be siloed from ongoing sort of health services and systems research focused on contraception method choice. And by bringing these together, I think we can make sure that the guidance that's offered to patients and clinicians is much more cohesive and takes into account all of these factors. So across Canada now we have 5 jurisdictions that have universally free access to contraception. And the main goal there was actually to support people to use more effective methods of contraception, like those long-acting reversible contraceptives. So we're kind of in the midst of this sea change, where now is the time to make sure that if someone's making that choice, which will improve their health in many other ways, like preventing unintended pregnancy, which is very common, we can add a layer to, if you're choosing an IUD to prevent pregnancy, might you also consider a combined oral contraceptive pill to reduce your risk of ovarian cancer, especially if you have a high a high risk of this disease going in? So having these, bringing together our our fields in this team grant really honors the intent of this grant program and will provide evidence that really supports people to comprehensively think about how these choices can impact their health across many domains.
Fantastic. So as you mentioned, you guys are all coming from very different fields. How did this sort of dream team end up coming together?
Well, I think it's forming teams is something which we're particularly good at in British Columbia. We all belong to the same university, and the question, as was mentioned earlier, is becoming more important because the changing practice in contraceptive use in Canada and the massive shifts which are happening. But the methods which we needed to use in AIM-1 didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago. So it's just very timely. And we were really able to aggregate something which looks a bit like a dream team around this project because the question is so interesting. And also the opportunity to work with people whom have very different skill sets, addressing different parts of the same big problem. It was inviting, and the particular competition we applied for, it encouraged team building. And we believe that this grant, which can't address all the questions around contraceptive use and cancer risk or what to do about it, but is providing a platform for us to build out from and engage other researchers and write other grants to address other questions. And so I think we're all looking forward to spending a large portion of our future research time with this group.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to chat with me today about such an interesting topic that I know our audience will love to hear more about. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for joining us on the GOSH podcast. To learn more about the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative and our podcast, make sure to check out our website at gynecancerinitiative.ca.